typically what will happen is procrastinating, research. So like, okay, now I need to go and get this certification and that one and that one and that one so I can do this. And then I also need to go and look at what everyone else is doing. And then I need to do all this thinking about okay, what's my niche and what it kind of just ends up with this we want to have all our ducks in a row when we're in that perfectionist mindset, and because we're thinking the way we start is the best it'll ever be, it's fixed, it can't be improved, so we need to have this perfect start in order to have a perfect ending as well. So it'll tend to, for most perfectionists that I work with at least, manifest a lot of times in this situation with this example as a lot of learning without implementation.
Hello and welcome to Uncovered, the podcast with your host, Jason Irving. Join me in a journey to understand what's truly happening in your world and the world around you. This is not about how you're living life on the surface. It's about what's truly driving you from under the covers. I'm going to take you on a journey to deeply uncover the reason why you are here, the ultimate purpose in your problems, and the way that they have shaped your life up until now. See, I believe you have a purpose, and your problems are the highway towards ultimate realization of that journey towards freedom and the reconnection of your true self. I've been told to have a different spin on most things, and I'll be giving you my understanding of life, love, and what we're all here for, purpose. To get the best out of this podcast, drop what you already know so you can discover what's beyond you. So join me, let's play this game of life and bring on liberation, transformation, and change. Let's do this. Hey guys, welcome to Uncovered. I'm really excited. I've got an amazing lady who helps people with perfectionism. And this is one of the hardest things that people have to bust through to get to the other side of breakthrough. So Sam Laura Brown, welcome to Uncovered. I'm really excited to talk to you today.
Thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
No worries. So look, give us a little bit of a backstory about you, Sam. What made you start this project that you do?
Yeah. Well, I could tell the long version, but I guess the short version would be that I was at university doing law and commerce. I graduated in 2015, but while I was at university, I was really starting to realize that wasn't the best fit for me to, I could continue to go through the motions and tick the boxes and I was doing well, but I just felt like it wasn't actually what I wanted to be doing. And I didn't know what I wanted to be doing, but I did stumble upon podcasts. So this is why I love podcasts so much, because that's what got me into the business world. So in 2013, I started listening to the TED Talks podcast, and then that led me to business podcasts. And I was just hearing about people starting businesses, particularly online businesses, blogging, that kind of thing. And eventually, after just enough exposure to that, I thought, well, maybe I'll do that. And I started a blog. And I was so in my own way. And at that point in time, I didn't really understand what perfectionism is. And I never identified as that, even though through school, those signs had been there, but I was getting good grades. It was working. But once I started my business and started actually showing up as myself and figuring that out, I guess, more in public, it felt so vulnerable to do that I really started to get in my own way. And for example, with my blog, I started it, I bought the website. I didn't post anything for 3 months. I stopped listening to podcasts. It just felt so confronting. Then once I got over that, I would post and then I'd edit the published post and I would kind of work in spurts of motivation a lot of times. So I'd be doing a lot and then nothing at all, that all or nothing mindset. And I slowly started to piece together that I didn't actually have a motivation problem. It was just this perfectionist mindset. And thanks to people like Carol Dweck and Brene Brown, really understanding more about perfectionism and the growth mindset and how I could do that work. And so, yeah, I just over those years started sharing my journey with it and what I was working on, and then started coaching clients on that as well. And now I work with perfectionist entrepreneurs, particularly because business really can bring up the perfectionist thoughts that are still there, but they start to cause more problems when it comes to having a business and there are no rules to follow and A+ to get and all of that kind of thing. And it can just there are a lot of people who want to start a business or have a business and want to grow the business, but because of that way of thinking, they aren't able to do the things they need to do. So through my journey with figuring that out for myself, and it's still a journey for me, that I've been able to help other people with that. And I'm very passionate about it because a lot of the dialogue around perfectionism is that it's toxic and you have to overcome it. And it's really just a way of thinking, and it can be changed, but it's not this, if we make it this big problem, then it's so much harder to move past it into something more productive. But that's kind of the short version of how I got into what I'm doing today.
I love this because I love your attitude too. We talk about this in our academy as well, about any word that we have, we can make it a big deal and a problem, or we can actually make it the solution. And so what you're talking about here is what we talk about in our academy is purpose in your problems. You had this problem, and I love your attitude too, because you're talking about the problem in your pocket, saying you're still working on it. And I think as business owners, we quite often put this facade. I love you already, Sam. Like, I love the fact that you are able to vulnerably share that you're working on the journey of it, as opposed to saying you're the solution of it. Because a lot of leaders go, now I'm on the other side, come with me. And you hold the truth because you're actually saying, I'll do this with you on the journey. And we're never ever solved, listeners, right? Yeah. All of us don't get hoodwinked by these people who say, I've done it. None of us have, in quotes, done it. I've still got my problems that I'm here to work through. And you said something really, really cool, Sam, that we can maybe elaborate on a little bit, is when you're doing a grade in uni, you can get that grade, but that's not about you, is it? It's about the grade. But then when you're doing something that's really personal, that actually is identifying you as a human being, this is when that perfectionist comes up, because we're worried about something. Can you tell us what that looks like from your experiences?
Yeah, for sure. So that is something I definitely experienced myself, that when I was at university and I was doing something that I wanted to do well in, but I also didn't have an identity around being a lawyer or being in finance. I did actually, after I graduated, work in accounting too. And I would never say I'm an accountant. I said, I work in accounting. Like it never was my identity that I had. But once I discovered the world of personal development, and I have always been someone that has been interested in that without really knowing what it is. And then just being like to my friends, like the wise friend and that kind of thing. Once I actually started to express that side of me, that really felt like the real me, that felt so much more vulnerable to fail at than failing at something I didn't really even want to begin with. And so that really brought up that perfectionism. And I love how Brené Brown talks about perfectionism, that it's really just the fear of shame, the fear of disconnection that's underpinning that. And a lot of the perfectionist tendencies, we tend to think of perfectionists as people who are perfect, like the people who are doing things perfectly. And a lot of times perfectionism, it's this strategy to avoid shame. So it manifests as all these different ways that we withhold giving a full effort. So we can always blame lack of effort for lack of results instead of having to point to ourselves. So this is why when you were mentioning about a lot of people who are in the perfectionist mindset struggling to get started, it's because we have this like all or nothing mindset going on as well. But it's so much easier to say, well, I would be successful if I just could get started, than to start and maybe find out that you aren't going to be successful. So we kind of do all these different things. And I talk about like procrastination, overwhelm, burnout, all or nothing mindset, and people pleasing, but they're all different ways that we try to avoid shame. Even though we tend to shame ourselves a lot, we try to avoid it and we withhold going all in. That includes even when perfectionists are over preparing, and like that's a way to avoid actually doing the true work that needs to be done and potentially risking finding out that we're not good enough. So yeah, it was something that I really came up against once I started my own business, that it felt so like me, that I just felt so vulnerable and like on show in a way I hadn't when I was working in areas that didn't really resonate with me as much as I wanted to be successful in them.
Yeah. And I think this is important, listeners, is that people don't understand this. And I think this is a really essential puzzle piece that we can open up with here, is that when you found your purpose, we all think, oh my God, what a great friggin' relief. But that's actually not the
No.
case. It's the complete opposite. So being in a job and it's Monday, you got Monday-itis, Wednesday's hump day, and Friday you can't wait for,
Yeah.
is actually comfort zone, right? And then when you have this meltdown, you go, I need something else. And then you find what you're looking for through your own problems and you solve it. And then you go, okay, now this is really personal. And then this is when the massive loops come up. So don't think, listeners, when you are in that place where you don't know what you want to do, that knowing what you're doing and what you want to do is actually easier. It actually gets harder. Your thoughts loop, your emotions drive, your limitations bang at your door, and you have to try to open that door no matter what.
Yeah. And I used to, like a few years ago, I really worked with people a lot around like getting started and figuring out what you wanted to do with your life. And for a lot of people, at least the people that I help and that resonate with what I talk about, they know exactly what they want to do. And this was the same for me. I used to be like, I don't really know what I want to. This is after I'd started the blog. I don't really know what I want to do. And I did. I was just so scared to admit it because then I'd have to do it. And then I'd have to maybe find out that I wasn't as good as it as I thought I would be and all of that kind of thing. So we know what we want to do and we're just scared to admit that to ourselves.
Yeah. And this is what's really important. Like we look and the number of times that I don't like verbalizing things sometimes, Sam, because I know when I verbalize to our academy, I'm like, now I've got to frigging do it. So
Yeah.
because I really make myself accountable when I voice. And I think this can be really, really challenging for all of us because I'm one of those people, like I was a healer. So I jumped into the healing world and got there. I was an IT professional. So I was finished my degree, spent 9 years doing that. And then I spent 16 years as an IT guy, sorry, healer. And then went, now I'm going to be a leader. And it's completely different frames that I've done, right? And each of them, you go straight into the same loops about whether you're going to be good enough, whether you're going to make it, and whether you can. And I don't think anybody's any different
Yeah.
when we go through this. Like we all go through the same things and we think we're unicorns, unique unicorns, when we're actually really not.
Yeah, I love this saying. I heard it from Tim Ferriss. I don't know if it's from him, but what's most personal is most universal. And I think that heavily relates to this and the experience of shame, which we all experience, and those feelings of inadequacy and doubts and all of that, that when we have them, we feel like, well, surely no one else is walking around feeling that way. It's just me. But we can be sure that everyone else walking around has very similar feelings, if not exactly the same ones, maybe from different circumstances, but that we all, like, it seems to be at least the human condition, that our brains just love having those kinds of thoughts. And I like to think about them like that not being a problem, that it's not that thing that has to be fixed, or if I'm having those kind of thoughts, that means there's something wrong with me. It's just like, oh yeah, there my brain goes again. Like that's what it's gonna, that it's wired to do that. And I can do things to get myself into a more productive mindset. But ultimately, I think if we make ourselves wrong for feeling bad or for feeling inadequate, it only makes those feelings much worse.
Yeah, 100%. And look, this is what I think is really interesting when, like, I love working. I really believe, just my opinion anyway, that women really need to step up higher in the forefront of leadership. And the reason being is there's an amazing thing that you guys own better than us. It's emotions, right? And those emotions actually cook you before the mind does. And you guys have more emotional connection being females than males do. And it's so nice to have you, Sam. The way that you language is exactly the way I language in our academy too, is that to know that these thoughts are natural and we actually are built on a negative frame, right?
Yeah.
And we don't know how to actually build ourselves on a positive frame. So one thing I don't know about you, Sam, I know these positive affirmations, they just don't work, do they? You know, you try them and they don't tend to work. But when you just look at that thought that's there, you can look at the thought and you can go, okay, that's okay. What it is, what am I going to do with my legs?
Yeah.
How am I going to
Well,
use my legs?
I love talking about this because I think there's a lot of nuance around it that often doesn't get discussed, that our brains, like with cognitive dissonance, our brain, it wants to keep thinking the same things it's already been thinking. And so if we present a thought to it that's dramatically different, it rejects that thought and just doubles down on the thought it's more familiar with.
Yeah.
But I found for myself that just using, so for example, when I wanted to quit my accounting job and pursue my business, that I actually wrote out an affirmation that was like, it's not this like positive affirmation of this kind of vague one, but it was, I will celebrate the last day at my full-time job on 30 June 2017 or sooner. And I wrote that out 15 times a day. And my brain initially was like, nope, like there's no way that's going to happen. But I was like, I don't care. I'm just going to like trust it and just keep writing it out. And just from the repetition, because our brains, like they love repetition. And if we just repeat something, we believe, there's so many false beliefs we have just because they've been repeated by others, by ourselves. So when I had that repeated to myself over and over again, I was actually able to see an opportunity that I hadn't seen before, that was like right under my nose, but I hadn't seen it until I had opened my brain up to and exposed it to with repetition, this idea of it's actually possible. And then I'd been able to, like you were saying, like, what are you going to do with your legs? Like from that new perspective, I'd been able to have a realization that I was then able to act upon and create a new reality for myself. But I think a lot of times with affirmations where people go wrong is that they pick something that feels so out of reach, their brain rejects it. But I love looking for, like when I'm coaching people, we look for like, what's a better feeling thought you have that's actually already believable to you. Like you don't need to do a lot of work on yourself to get there. Like it's actually, your brain doesn't default there, but it is actually something your brain can contemplate, can consider, can potentially like adopt. And then looking at that, and there's obviously all different ways to do coaching and to do this kind of work. But in my experience, that it's not that positive affirmations don't work, but the way we often approach them is just kind of like talking over ourselves and dismissing ourselves and like trying to should ourselves into thinking better. And it never is productive to dismiss ourselves and how we're feeling, but to actually be like, hey, I'm just going to offer my brain a different kind of thought and do that more than once, because I know how brains work and they need that, and see what happens from that. So that's my, like one of my many experiences with it. But I think I love talking about it because there's a lot of nuance around it and everyone has different viewpoints on it as well.
Yeah, I love that. Because what you said is really important. And listeners, what Sam is bringing to the table here is, if you put an affirmation that is way too out of reach, this is why it's too hard to actually, for your brain waves to actually say, I can be that, right? And that's perfectionism, isn't it? It's like we think and like we want that thing and we say, okay, we have to be it now before we go on the journey of it and actually become it, right? And it's so challenging when we say, I want to be fully peaceful, let's say, in life. And now that's an impossibility, because we're going to have bumps, parents are going to die, we're going to have problems, and there's going to be a car accident, we might be in it, or we'll see something dramatic, and peace will not be a possibility all the time. So we actually break it through something that is way too unattainable or impossible too.
Yeah. And I think that on that note, that say, for example, I will be fully peaceful, like we don't even want to be in peace all the time. Like if our parents die, we don't want to feel at peace necessarily. That might be an emotion we want at some point, but we want to feel sad and grief and those feelings, or if we're in a car crash or anything like that. Like we don't, I think a lot of times like this all or nothing thinking that we're like, well, I have to I have to either be the most extreme version of that, or there's no point trying to pursue that at all. And that's like that affirmation that I had. It wasn't based on this kind of vague feeling or vibe or something like that. It was a very specific thing that my brain could actually latch onto and start to then, like with the reticular activating system and how our brain just like looks for evidence to confirm what we believe. Once I repeated it enough, because it was specific, my brain could then start filtering my reality differently, and I could see things that I couldn't see before. But when it's this, as you were saying, like this kind of, a lot of times perfectionists do this, we set these impossible standards for ourselves so that we can not meet them, and we get to beat ourselves up and get this kind of like it sounds kind of weird to say, but like this kind of connection with ourselves that we get when we're in self-pity or when we're in overwhelm, that we can create that for ourselves by creating impossible standards that we can't reach. And yet at the same time, like in my coaching program, we teach goal setting in a way that you actually set your goal above what you believe is possible for yourself. So we don't set a realistic goal, even though it is realistic, our brains don't believe it, but it's so that you can grow into the person that you need to be in order to achieve it. Because a lot of times for perfectionists, if we just have these realistic goals, then we just achieve it in our perfectionist way. And we just kind of reinforce those tendencies and behaviors, and our brain gets more evidence that it actually works. But having a goal where you have to at least, like I call it the perfectionism handbrake, you have to at least release it a little bit to get there. It really helps. So it's not like you either have to have a goal that's completely realistic or an affirmation that's completely realistic, or the other alternative is impossible. But I love finding that kind of sweet spot where it invites your brain into a new possibility it hasn't considered, but it's not so outlandish that your brain just rejects it completely and sends you into a spin.
So I'm going to ask you a question, Sam. So
Yeah.
I'm going to put me in the picture here, right? So here I am. I'm saying to you, Sam, my vision, this is my vision that I want to have for our academy. I want it to be the #1 academy for personal development in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
So if I was a perfectionist, right, and I said that to you, how would my brain cope with that idea if I was, and my brain's going, okay, I need to be that now? What would happen to me psychologically? Where would I put my handbrakes?
Well, it depends on, and I think this is such a great question, because the answer is it's nuanced. It depends. And it depends on your belief level that you have around it. So if like the way if you are saying that and you actually believe it,
Yeah.
and it doesn't create vulnerability for you, or it feels like an exciting challenge. This is more like being in the growth mindset where we feel like it's a challenge, but it's a challenge I want to take on. I'm going to learn and grow and all of that kind of thing. And not just intellectually getting that, but really living that. But if someone was to say that, and maybe they are saying, I want my academy to be #1, and they don't have an academy and they've never tried, and it's something they've dreamt about, but a lot of times, so I talk about the 5 different ways it tends to come up. So that's procrastination for perfectionists, tends to be productive procrastination, as much as there can be scrolling on Instagram or social media or whatever. It tends to be busy work, procrastinating, procrastinating, that kind of thing. Overwhelm is a way that it comes up, like we indulge in this overwhelm. And as I said, it's a way we connect with ourselves and we get to like feel like we have a lot of potential, but if I just had more time, then I'd be able to do more, and then I'd be more successful. But I don't have more time. And it's just this kind of, we just end up in this cycle of self-pity and overwhelm. And we do that so we don't have to actually do the things that we need to do. Then there's burnout. And that comes from the energy we're working from rather than how many hours we're working. So if it's from inadequacy, insufficiency, then that's what creates it. All or nothing mindset and people pleasing. So there's obviously a lot to cover there and a lot to go into and all of that. But a lot of times, I think, as you mentioned, procrastination is a big one. And particularly for people who love being productive, it's looking out for the busy work. And particularly if someone hasn't, if we're talking to someone who is saying that statement, but they haven't yet started, typically what will happen is procrastinating, research. So like, okay, now I need to go and get this certification and that one and that one and that one so I can do this. But then I also need to go and look at like what everyone else is doing. And then I need to like do all this thinking about like, okay, what's my niche and what, like, it kind of just ends up with this, we like want to have all our ducks in a row, like when we're in that perfectionist mindset. And because we're thinking like the way we start is the best it'll ever be. Like it's fixed, it can't be improved. So we need to have this perfect start in order to have a perfect ending as well. So it'll tend to, for most perfectionists that I work with at least, manifest a lot of times in this situation with this example as a lot of learning without implementation.
Gotcha. Yeah, and that can be challenging, isn't it? It's like we have the dream in our head, and a lot of people are dreamers. They go, oh,
yeah.
And some people actually, I've had a few people that I've worked with, and they've had the dream, and they think that they've already done the thing,
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, what steps are you going to take? Oh, I don't know. And then they get stuck in the dream that's like a landscape of beauty that they've manufactured in their brain, and they're actually not there. They're just
Yeah.
thinking that they're there.
And we
And this
have
is
to be so mindful of that because, as you were saying, like it can, especially if we spend a lot of time engaged with getting started, it feels like we've started when you actually haven't implemented anything. And I love thinking about having our ideas meet reality, but also how vulnerable that feels when we're in the perfectionist mindset and we feel like everything we do is evidence of whether or not we're good enough. So, of course, we want to live in this dream world where,
yeah,
oh my goodness, if I only was able to just start and I had more time and I didn't have kids to look after, or I didn't have this or I didn't have that or whatever, a full-time job, then I could have this incredible business. It's kind of like New Year's, how there's so much optimism and hope when it comes to the 1st of January, because you haven't got any evidence yet of what's actually happening. It's just like really living in this little moment in time where everything feels possible and there's no evidence to the contrary. But
yeah,
as soon as you start implementing, 100% things aren't going to work. 100% they're not going to go to plan. And when we're in that perfectionist mindset, rather than being more towards a growth mindset, that feels so vulnerable that of course we avoid it. And if we do get started, then we just kind of shut down and forget about it, or like get busy with other things and kind of oftentimes don't blatantly quit, but oh, actually I had this great idea and I just need to go and research that. Like it's more so for people, that kind of thing, rather than like, oh, I quit and I can't do it. It's this subtle quitting that often looks like, especially for people who've been praised for being smart and intelligent while growing up, that it becomes this, actually, I've just had this great realization. I need to go and research one more thing before I can get started.
mm. I'm really glad that I've never been too smart, Sam. It's because I've always just done stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I think I'd love your opinion on this. Is that when when we're in the perfectionist state and things are going really well, and then they start going down, what does the perfectionist do when things start to fail and they've had a really good level of success and things are going really well and they're feeling pumped? What happens to the perfectionist head that when it actually starts going down into the valley again instead of up the hill?
Yeah. So it depends, I guess, but like we all have our kind of favorite ways to avoid actually continuing to try. But a lot of times, as I said, that'll be like, okay, I just need to research. Actually, I need to sign up for this other program that could help me with this thing, or like that kind of thing. Or it could be I've had a different idea completely. But a lot of times before that, there will be a shame spiral, and there will be kind of, it depends on the person and where they're at in their journey with this mindset, but could be days, could be weeks, could be months, could be years of just being in this pit of despair and disappointment and beating themselves up. And really, like, it's from this mentality that we have when we're in that perfectionist mindset of like, if things don't work the first time right away, that's a sign that I'm not good enough. And when we're in that perfectionist mindset, we see effort as a sign of adequacy. So we're wanting things to be successful instantly, and we're wanting it to be effortless. And so this is why I help entrepreneurs, because that's like the opposite of what happens to build a business.
Yeah.
It's not going to work right away. It's probably going to take you 27 attempts, and like you'll have to iterate each time. And it's not going to be effortless. You're going to need to grow a lot, learn a lot of new skills, whether that's doing things yourself or hiring a team. Like you're going to need to do new things you've never done before. That's what entrepreneurship is a lot of the time. And so when we're in this perfectionist mindset and pursuing entrepreneurship, it really presents this like, you're failing and you have to learn. This is what I really teach people, like how to get through that dip and like how to think about it differently, not just in this like positive affirmation kind of way, but like actually believing it in your body and having that experience where it no longer feels like a threat to your adequacy and sufficiency when things are failing or when you're not getting the result you anticipated. But yeah, a lot of times a shame spiral, pit of despair and disappointment. And then after that will come a period of procrastinating and procrastinating research. And then like, okay, now I'm feeling motivated, I'll try again. But of course, the next attempt unlikely is going to be immediately successful. And so that can just be a loop that perfectionists often find themselves in.
Yeah, and it can be really challenging, Sam, isn't it? Like people
Yeah.
don't understand business. Like people go, "Oh yeah, I do business," and it's actually one of the hardest things, and it's one of the things that actually really tests your growth levels, and how you handle things. And you don't think it's going to be an easy ride, guys. And the tricky thing is that we hear this in social media so often. The guy who creates the 4-hour work week, but he's got a whole bunch of staff to be able to do that. There's a whole lot of smokes and mirrors that have been sort of shared that are not real when you start off. You have to work hard. You have to push through your boundaries, and you have to do things yourself that you can't pay someone to do in the beginning. So it's a lot more effort than you realize than just everything. And we read these books and we go, and this can be really tricky for the perfectionist. You read a 4-hour work week book, or you read, hey, how I got from zero to $1 million in 6 weeks. And I know a guy who's done that, right? 6 weeks. That is an anomaly. That's not normal, right? And then people can get really down on themselves when they don't hit the marker on the expectation that they've read through the books.
Yeah. And I think it comes down to as well that all or nothing mindset we tend to be in when it comes to being in that perfectionist mindset. And that, say, for example, the 4-hour work week. And I personally love Tim Ferriss in that book, that like when we're in that all or nothing mindset, we ignore the nuance, and that it's just teaching a principle and not saying you should work 4 hours a week, and anything more than that is a failure. And like we're missing, like, actually, this is just a framework that can help you delegate more and work more efficiently. And we kind of just go, well, it's got this label on it and that isn't realistic. So I can just ignore that completely. And of course, there are things that resonate with us more than others. But something that I teach perfectionists is really important is clean rest, which is resting without guilt. And that a lot of times, like, I would be so interested to hear your thoughts as well on like hard work. There's a lot of discussion around like, you just need to work hard. And my experience has been that because of my perfectionist mindset, particularly when I was in it more so, like I think of it as being on the spectrum, perfectionist mindset, growth mindset, like when I was really in that mindset, that in the early days of my blog, I was working so hard. And it was because I was overcomplicating. I was overthinking. I wasn't doing like clean hard work and like doing courageous things and doing them in a simple way and like getting my work out into the world. My experience was that it was really hard, but it was for the wrong reasons. And so I think with that discussion, there needs to be a lot more nuance of like, yes, it's going to take more effort. And even if, like, for me, in the beginning, I couldn't hire anyone. I didn't have like the resources or like the mindset to do that. And now I'm at the point in my business where I'm needing to learn the skill set of continuing to hire people and like getting work done through others. And that's super challenging as well, because you just want to keep being the person that's doing all the things and like getting that dopamine hit of like, I tick off the task. So yeah, it's just really about knowing that with that perfectionist mindset, it makes us overcomplicate things and overthink things and stay in overwhelm. And if we mistake that for the hard work people talk about when they say it takes hard work to build a business, then we end up in this trap, this like kind of way of operating that really isn't helpful at all. So I like to instead be focused on doing things in a consistent, sustainable, productive, meaning effective and efficient and courageous way.
I love that.
And there will be times where you don't want to do the thing, but you got to do the thing. And you need to have a conversation you don't want to have, or you need to do something that feels super scary, but you're going to do it anyway. But it's just, I guess, having the nuance around, when is it hard because you're making it hard because you want it to be hard to feel deserving? And when is it hard because it's courageous and vulnerable and requiring you to really grow and meet a new version of yourself? Like, that's the hard work we want, not the hard work that's like us making things hard for ourselves so we can feel like we've earned our success.
Yeah, and I 100% agree with you. I'm in this age group. I'm a little bit older than you, right? I look a lot older than you. I'm not going to ask. You're a woman. I'm not going to ask you how old you are, right? My mum has always been built on that. You have to work hard, like all that mentality. And I'm in the bridge, right? And the lovely thing about working and spending time with people like you, Sam, is that you actually have a different attitude through your age and the group. of consciousness that's coming through right now with your age level. And quite often the older guys go, no, you don't know what it's all about. Whereas for me, I look at the younger generation and go, what have I got to learn from them? Because they have the right attitude, right? And so every time I hear someone younger voice, I'm a wise old man. I listen, right? And I
I love
go,
that.
this woman's got it. She's got it on. And listeners, listen to her. Because what she's saying is work on that stuff that's hard, that's growy, right?
Yeah.
But you don't have to work your ass off. That's different. And when someone comes in like this, and this is the beautiful attitude of the millennials, they have a way of approaching that is really, really special, because they actually say the right things, and the way that they want to live is very, very different to the older generations. And these are the ones that you got to listen to, listeners, around entrepreneurship right now, how you can build stuff in a way that's actually not going to lead to burnout, sickness, and all of these things, because your generation doesn't want that.
Yeah.
And I love what you're bringing to the table here, because this is the essential ingredient, listeners, to actually build a healthy baseline with your well-being, as opposed to what the older generation would do, just work their ass off, get cancer and die, right?
Yeah.
And that's not what we're here for. We're here to have a lovely balance and a lovely connection, and to know that we're going to have psychological intangibles that can be really hard and no one can see, right? So in entrepreneurship, mental health is about 4 or 5 times higher, 30, I think it's about 30 to 40% higher in entrepreneurs than it is in any other world, right? Because we're going through things that we've never done before, and we're not in a job, and it's personal, right? So it's not necessarily the work hard, it's the psychological that you do that's so essential, that people really need.
Yeah. And a lot of times, thank you for that. The psychological challenges, like for perfectionists, is taking rest. That's the hard thing to do. The easy thing is to work yourself into the ground and just keep showing up and doing the thing. And it's like, it's that kind of, which might sound contradictory to what I was saying before, but like when it's like we're showing up to do the overworking and the busy work, and it's not moving us forward, but we don't want to be a lazy person who's not deserving. So we kind of end up in this this situation where we're working all the time but getting nothing done, and feeling guilty about it, and resenting people for taking time away from the business. But then when we get the time, we waste it, and it's kind of this situation that it's really about knowing. And this is why clean rest is something that's so fundamental, is that it takes courage to take time off from your business, especially if your business is your whole identity, to actually explore, like, who am I when I'm not working? Like, what do I actually enjoy doing? And there's so many benefits to rest when it comes to like how our brains operate. And then we can have a well-rested brain in the business, which has better ideas, is able to implement more effectively. But at the same time, like, there is more to life. And when we just are very focused on, I need to be more successful so I can be more loved and not feel inadequate, that we kind of lose sight of the bigger picture and how a business fits into the rest of things. And the hard work for most of my clients is taking time away. And then when they are in their business, doing the most important things, and as I said, doing them consistently, sustainably, productively, and courageously, doing that in the time they said they would do it. So it's not just doing things that you don't feel like, but doing them in a time frame that might be challenging for you as well. And like rising to that occasion, not overthinking, not overcomplicating, keeping it simple so you can actually put your ideas out. And then taking time off and just being with yourself and with your thoughts, and with like what we often try to avoid by like this work hard. I think a lot of times that's just a cover for like, I don't actually know how to be with myself when I'm not working. But it's socially acceptable to work hard. And a lot of us have beliefs as well that, like I did when I first got into coaching and coming from like the corporate world, I was like, oh, I get paid because I don't like what I do. It's compensation for doing something that I don't like, was the mentality that I had, not consciously. But I only realized that once I got into coaching. I was like, oh, I would do it for free, so I should do it for free, and all of this kind of stuff. And just having to unwind, like, I'm not getting paid, like I'm getting paid for the value, not for the they're not compensating me. My client isn't paying for me to do something I don't like. And if they were, it's probably not going to be a great experience for them anyway. But we just kind of have these beliefs of like, if I work hard, then I'm deserving and no one can call me inadequate, because there's this fear around like, well, what if I was super successful, but everyone's like, well, you barely even work and all of that kind of stuff. So like, oh, I better look busy. So everyone can be like, well, look how, like, people will say to me, like, look how hard you worked. I'm like, I actually work 3 days a week, but sure. And so people like want to, when you are successful, validate that with, but look how hard you work. I'm like, I do a lot of hard work, but part of that is resting. And part of that is doing the courageous things in the time I have for my business and not letting myself do all the busy work that my brain wants to do.
Yeah, I love that. And so when we're in this place where, you are taking that time off, how do you encourage a person who is a perfectionist to actually switch off? Like, because a lot of people go, oh yeah, I better go and play golf, or I'll go and do dancing lessons. And they're doing their dancing lessons and they're thinking, oh, I've got a great idea for the business. Right?
Yeah.
And we do this often when you drop the thing. Like, I love going for walks and in nature, and it's one of the things that I do to drop everything. And then all of a sudden something comes up that says, oh, you could do this. What do you do there when your brain's wired for creation?
Yeah. And my brain wired the same way.
Yeah.
And I think initially I had this belief that if I have an inspired idea, which we tend to have when we're away from the business, I need to act on it right away or I won't be able to implement it. And that was really coming from a lack of trust in myself to be able to execute an idea beyond the moment that it was conceived. And so what I like to do is just write that down and trust that like future me is going to be able to implement that even better than me in that moment. But also what I teach when it comes to clean rest, so guilt-free rest, is initially, and I teach a method called power planning to get into the growth mindset. It kind of covers all the practical things you need to do whilst also having you do the things you need to do to build your business. And so when we're doing that, and that involves working from a calendar, but when we're doing that, the first thing we put in our commitments, and then we put in our clean rest before the business tasks. And it's initially just about having a clear, like having decided when am I working and when am I not working. And it's okay, especially in the beginning, like your brain is going to still generate these thoughts of I should be working, I should be doing something more productive than this. I have the best idea, I should go and do that. Like letting your brain do that, it's going to do that for a while, and just sticking to that clean rest that you have and letting there be, like, this is actually something I took away from the 4-hour work week, since you mentioned it, is like filling the void. He talks about like work for work's sake in that book. And that if you don't actually figure out what you like doing beyond work, you will just work for the sake of it because you don't know what else to do. And so initially there is going to be a void. And that is often what we're trying to avoid, is this feeling of like, I have all this time. My brain's telling me I should be doing, like, I'm already behind. I should be doing more things in the business. And I don't even I'm not even enjoying this time. I'm not even fully present. I don't even know what I want to do. So I should just do some more work. And it's just like being with ourselves in that void and letting it be okay and letting there be space and trusting that if you continue to let that be there, you will start to reconnect with yourself and have ideas for different things you can do. And your brain will start to calm down and create emotional safety around rest, because we have this idea, like, emotionally, that it's unsafe to be resting because it means that we're not going to be successful. We're not going to be loved. We're going to be left by everyone and all of that kind of thing. So it takes practice and like rewiring for our brain to understand it's safe to rest. And we have to like expose it to that and let there be a void and let our brain still have the guilty thoughts. And knowing you will have great ideas. You will have the urge to work. And it's not to say, like, I teach 80% follow through. It's not about like all or nothing, 100% or do whatever. It's like just aiming for more often than not. And so for sure, there are times where I have a great idea and I'm like, I'm actually going to start working. Like, it's not this like strict rule that you have to have, but just a guideline there of like, when in doubt, I'm going to keep resting and I'm going to work on trusting myself to implement an idea that I have when my next work block comes. And I know I'm going to be more capable of doing that because my brain is going to be well rested instead of it being on like this hamster wheel all the time and just so exhausted. It has these clear parameters that allow it to function at a higher level. And something I talk about just to illustrate this is so a lot of people like work from an endless to-do list, and it's kind of this mentality, like there's always something to get done, I'm behind and all of that kind of thing. And if you think about burpees, for example, which for people who aren't familiar with the exercise of burpees, very uncomfortable. Most people don't like them, requires like every muscle in your body pretty much. And if you had a personal trainer and they said, I just want you to do 10 burpees and then you're done. And then tomorrow you're going to come back, you're going to do 10 burpees. Like you can do that. Your brain is like, okay, I know what I need to do. I'm going to get it done. I know rest is coming and then I'll come back tomorrow. But what we do to our brains is we say, you just need to do burpees nonstop. And if you do them really well, I'm going to make you do even more of them to try and capitalize on how well you're doing. And it's just this never ending, you're never going to have a break. So if we were in that situation, we'd be like, actually, I just need to go to the bathroom. Actually, I think I left something in my car. We'd like do all these things to just try and get out of that situation. So that's part of the reason we procrastinate and do all these things, is because we're not giving our brain a break. So it's doing what it needs to do to get the break. But if we can clearly say to our brain, look, I know you need to do this courageous thing, but there's a break coming up. And there's going to be this time where you don't have to be feeling vulnerable and you can see the light at the end of the tunnel. That really helps when it comes to this discussion around how to actually, as a perfectionist, like get shit done and do what you need to do. That just like working with how our brains work, that it needs to just know that I'm not going to feel like I'm out in the wilderness about to get attacked by a lion 24/7 because I'm just going to completely shut down. But if I know it's just for 10 minutes and then I can come back to the cave, I can do that. And so it's like using our psychology, and I like to call it like getting our perfectionist mindset on our side, like using that to our advantage and framing things in a way. And that includes the rest, so that our brain can get on board with it, feel emotionally safe in it, and we can have a full life in our business and in our personal lives as well.
I love this, because a lot of people that I've spent time with, and you could hopefully listeners who are hearing this who really need to understand how important this is rest is not actually even considered in entrepreneurship. It's not even part of the system of working in a business at all, and it's such an essential ingredient to know how to stop, the way in which we stop that's going to work for us, what's going to give us balance. Because one thing I've learned is that if people just focus on the beers, usually what I see, and I've seen this with a lot of people that I've mentored, is that they don't have a good relationship with their partner. Their family structures are blowing out. Their health is a catastrophe. Either they're over healthy, like full on six pack is not super healthy, guys. It means that you've got a bit of obsession running, finances and all of those things. Not necessarily, they could be great, but where are you using them, right? Where's the time that you get to enjoy? And I think this is such a great conversation, love, because it's not spoken about.
Yeah.
Right?
It's not, unfortunately. And I think with this conversation around hard work, like as you're saying, if your relationship sucks, if your family's blowing up, if like you're not in the healthy state you want to be in and your finances aren't great, of course you want to work hard. You want to be focused on the business to avoid all of that other stuff. And so it just becomes this continuing thing that your personal life gets worse and worse. And even if the business is more successful, this is when people are like, we think, oh, if someone has a successful business, they must feel so good. But it's like, it depends on how they built it. For some people, yes, if they built it in a way that really worked for them and was sustainable for them, sure. And they had a personal life as well. Or there are some people, like we all have different needs for what we want from our personal life. It's not like cut and dry, everyone wants the same thing, but it's really looking at like the how as well. And that's what I really work on myself and with my clients is it's yes, about making money and building a bigger business, but the how that you use to get there is so important. And it's often skipped over at this, like, well, I need to get there at any cost as quickly as I can. And you don't magically feel better when you get there, if you got there in a way that feels absolutely horrible, it's just going to keep feeling a pretty similar way.
Yeah, I love this because look, like this is the essential ingredient that people need to hear is that, we get to two paradigms here is knowing how to build a business smart, right? And so when you build it smartly, you build it in a healthy way to make sure everything is regulated, because if you're not regulated in the beginning, you're not going to be regulated as you're going through your business. So you need someone like Sam who's going to be able to pull you up and show you how to give yourself permission to enjoy entrepreneurship as opposed to going through the heartaches of it. Do you agree?
Yeah. And I think it's when it comes to this conversation of like balance and enjoying and that kind of thing, I know for sure past me would have been like, I don't care about enjoying it. I just want to get there.
Yeah.
And it's really knowing that like the kind of enjoyment I help people with that I'm still definitely working on myself is enjoying the challenges, enjoying the failures, enjoying the personal life too, and figuring out what that looks like and uh, being all in on that. But also like within the business itself, instead of like, well, I enjoy business when it's going great and I can tough it out during the hard times, when we're really in that growth mindset, it's about like, that's when we're like, this is the best. Like, I love this. It's this big, juicy challenge and I get to overcome it. I get to solve it and put my brain to it. And like that kind of enjoyment, because I really believe when people, talk about wanting fulfillment, for me at least, fulfillment is when there's a challenge and I rise to that occasion. That's what to me is fulfilling. And I'm often working alongside others on that journey, but it's fulfilling to see yourself rise to a challenge rather than just, we think fulfillment is often like, well, everything magically works the first time and it's so easy and it's so effortless and I'm just in my purpose, doing my passion. And like, to me, that isn't fulfilling. What's fulfilling is doing something challenging and blowing my own mind that I can do that because past me couldn't. So that when it comes to enjoyment, it's not just about like, let's make everything fun. It's like, how can we enjoy, not just tolerate, but actually enjoy and find satisfaction and fulfillment with the challenges that are inevitable. Like there's no way around them. There's no program you can buy. There's not like, it's part of the process for a reason. It's like the most cliche thing to say ever, but cliches tend to be true. It is part of the journey for a reason. And especially lately, I've really been able to get even more so in a mindset of like seeing business as a game and like in the sense that it's like experimental and being more in that mindset of like testing and seeing how it went and iterating rather than initially I was like, well, I have to have it work right away or that means I'm not good enough. And then of course you like set out this tiny bump in the road and you just want to quit completely. So yeah, it's really about enjoying the ups and the downs. And there will be times as well you don't enjoy it, but like ultimately having an attitude towards it where you're able to find satisfaction, like feel some kind of excitement almost when there is a big challenge and you're like, oh, good, I get to like work on this problem.
I love that. I was in a group of people quite a while ago, and they're 8 figure income earners, and they were talking. Someone melted down. It was really interesting because it was in a setting that it was all, hey, we're all got it covered, and this lady melted down. And I was just like, okay, I'm the PD guy. Everyone else is a business coach. How is everyone going to handle this, right? And the most interesting thing, it opened up a dude who's been he was the first person who earned money on Facebook, by the way. Can't remember his name. First person who earned money on Facebook. So old dude. And he basically said this really vulnerably. I just want to let you know, 90% of the things we try don't actually work.
Yeah, it's
right?
true.
and then it was just like a penny drop, like a pin drop when he said it. And it was just, everyone went, oh, thank God.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because we don't know that 90% of the things and 10% that you get to is your bread and butter.
Yep.
But 90% of the things you're going to try are going to be your challenges and they won't work. And then you'll find the way. And that's the beauty of growth in business, is that that's why we do it, isn't it, Sam? Right? We're going to find that 10% somewhere, whereas 90% of the things we try go pop boom.
Yeah. And it's so much easier to find the 10% when you know it's the 10% and you're not mistakenly thinking it should be everything, because then we just like, you have that first failure or that second one and you're like, okay, well, this definitely isn't working. And a lot of times perfectionists were like, I'm just going to reinvent the wheel and do things completely differently, when actually it's like, you just need to make a little small tweak and try again. And then you make another little tweak and try. And at some point you might see, actually, okay, I need to do something differently. But we tend to default to, if it didn't work, I'm just going to like start over.
Yeah, blow it up.
And I love, like, if in doubt, keep it the same and try again. Like, just because we love to just scratch things, because it gives us that like January 1st feeling of like, well, now I have this clean slate and now I have all these things I need to learn about as well. And I can be busy with that, to just like, no, just tweak it a little, not too many things, because then you won't know what made the difference. Just tweak something and try it again. And like, it takes patience. It's not the like instant gratification approach, but that is how you find the 10%. In my experience, most of the time is just keeping at it with iteration, rather than like trying to strike gold the first time on like 20 different ideas.
100%. Sam, I really want to thank you for jumping on Uncovered today, because this has been such an amazing conversation. Listeners, I really implore you to find out about what Sam's doing, all of the details of what Sam does and how she does what she does. How to find her will be in the show notes, so you can find her nice and easily. This has been such an amazing conversation, Sam. Like, you really have something really special inside of you. It's really nice to hear your passion and what makes you tick, and the way in which entrepreneurship, in my opinion, you have it covered about how to build something. So please, listeners, I suggest you catch up with this amazing entrepreneur and find out what she's doing and get her help. So thank you, Sam, for jumping on Uncovered with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much for listening to our podcast. We really appreciate you, and we really appreciate your time, because time is so valuable. What we'd love you guys to do, if you like this podcast, if you could share it with your friends, and also our website address for the podcast is www.wellnessbreakthroughacademypodcast.com. Our website is www.wellnessbreakthroughacademy.com. We have a free Facebook group called Wellness Leadership Evolution, so search for that. I'd love it if you could add me as a friend on Facebook. I don't bite, so add me as a friend. And if you want some help and you would really like some support from us in the Academy, jump in. We have a process. You can do a break-in call to connect in with us. We do small courses. We have lots of things that we share. So we'd love the opportunity to give you a chance to change your life and turn it into a free one. You are one transformation away from change. Come and catch up.